I'm Caleb with Woodshop, and today we're going to make this finger joint or box joint jig. It's actually pretty easy and you should get a lot of use out of it if you plan on doing a lot of finger joints. So let's check it out. So if making box joints or finger joints is something that you think you're going to want to do, you could make a really simple jig just using a board, preferably plywood. This isn't, but using just a board and attaching it to your miter gauge either with clamps or with screws from the backside. And this works out pretty well, although every time you set it up you're going to have to adjust it to make sure that your registration key is the right distance from your blade. It could be kind of a pain to set up every time, and then you might get it just perfect, but then you got to take it off because you need to use your miter gauge for something else. So I think a much better solution is to actually just make a little sled for your saw instead. I forgot to bring my damn camera today. A while back when I made the follow-up table, I cut the edges flush, and that left me with these thin strips of beech wood, and believe it or not, they were a perfect fit for the miter slot. All I had to do was cut them to length. Glued this down. You can see I put a couple little strips of wood down in here to raise the runners a little bit. I've got them glued. I just got some weight sitting on there. And I went ahead and glued on this little strip of plywood to be a back fence. These don't ever really matter if they're perfectly square with the blade or not. I got a late start for the day, so I'll probably let this set overnight. And I remembered to bring my camera today, my proper camera. So this is set overnight. See how it slides. But other than that, it slides really good, so we can set that off to the side and start working on the rest of the jig for now. I'm going to cut the fence for the part of the jig that you'll be holding on to, and I'm just using some more of that same kind of plywood. So I've played around with the configuration of my dado stack to accommodate this with a nice fit, and as always you should run some tests. My first test, it was a little bit too loose, and the second one seems to be about just right. So now I've got what I made for the fence, and I'm going to cut a notch in there to accommodate this, and I'm using a scrap board just behind here to try to eliminate chip out on the back. I could glue in my key, and it might be worth pointing out that when you make your key, you might want to round over the top edges so it'll be easier when you're cutting actual pieces for a box for them to find their way over the key. Glue it into that notch that we just cut. And just pop it into place. This part scares me a little bit because now we got to try to get the jig lined up right so our joints will fit correctly. So that same piece of wood that I cut the key out of, I'm just lining it up against my dado stack, pushing this over. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a cut going through the jig, but not all the way through, and then I'll use that cut and hopefully try to line things up so I can attach that fence that we made. Fence and tried to get this notch perfect with this groove that we cut. Feels seamless, so I've clamped it down and I'm gonna run a screw into it and get this fence screwed in place. And I'm not gonna glue it because I don't want to have this incorrect and then not be able to adjust it. And I just screwed this block onto the back so the blade has something to bury into and won't be exposed on this back side. Alright, I just did 2 tests on here, and my first test, my joints were too tight. I readjusted my fence by moving it over about the thickness of a playing card. That gives me some nice joints with no gaps and are really easy to put together and take apart. So when you put glue in there and it makes things a little bit thicker, then you won't have any issues. Now we could actually use this to build a project. And that could give you some really nice, accurate, well-fitting joints too. And once you get it set up, as long as you remember the correct configuration you used on your dado stack, then it should come out great every time. I think it came out really nicely. It works really well, and it's nice to know that anytime I need to make box joints, I could just throw this sled up here, put in my dado stack, and go. I don't have to worry about adjusting that other kind of jig onto my miter gauge, and my miter gauge is free for if I need to use it for anything else. So be sure to check out this finger joint jig in action, making a car trash can box. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.